Okay, this week we're taking a look at working with type in motion, and in the textbook he does a pretty good job of showing you how to use type in a cohesive composition, and I just wanted to work on a couple of things to kind of show you a variety of different ways that you might enhance type and create text layers in After Effects, especially using the effects and presets. And before we do that, I want to make sure that you have Adobe After Effects on. You should follow along with my video. You can watch it, of course, beforehand, but it's good if you follow along. We're going to make 3, maybe 4 different compositions, and then when they'll all be in this one video, I think. And I'll tell you to pause between the different exercises so you can take a break if you need to. I try to keep my videos short, but we'll take a look at creating text layers. And what we're going to do, if you have After Effects on, is I want you to select composition and a new composition, and then let's just call this composition Supernova Text. And what I'd like to do is let's use HDTV 720, and what that basically is it's high definition video, similar to what you might get out of a digital camcorder. And when you select the preset and your setting there, you get some information about that output, that format, and the codec. The width and height is standard for HDV. This is essentially what we sometimes call 720p. Is 1280 by 720 pixels, and the aspect ratio is 16 by 9. And this is what you see on your high definition TVs. And the frame rate is 30 frames per second. And so let's create a video that's just going to be 5 seconds. And we can see here that when we type 500, we see that it's 5 seconds. And we'll just enter. And now it opens up to the composition panel. There's nothing on the timeline because we don't have any text. Let's take a few seconds to just review the text, utilizing a text layer. So if I want to type text here, in the book he doesn't really, and even if you watch his video, emphasize that. He kind of briefly mentions it, and it's pretty simple and straightforward, but there are 2 categories of text. There's point text, which is essentially one line. So if I go to the text tool and I click into the composition pane and I start typing, then this is basically point text. This is one line of text. And you notice that if I keep typing, it's going to run off. It's not going to wrap. So with point text, you get one line. Now, if I wanted to utilize paragraph text, then what I need to do is let's get rid of this text. So I'll go out and delete it. What I need to do is to specify first, select the horizontal type tool, and then click and drag to sort of specify the area where I want to use paragraph text, which you can imagine is multi-line text, right? So I start typing and say this is paragraph text because, see how it automatically wrapped to the next line? Use a multi-line paragraph. And you know I studied engineering and not typing. And so I just wanted to demonstrate that, and it's pretty straightforward in how that works. And so we're not going to utilize that let's go ahead and let's just get rid of it. Okay, now that we've fooled around with the text types, let's take a look at animating a text layer. And let's say we were going to create an opening like title for the movie Supernova, which is an old movie. And let's say that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type times just to fool around here a little bit, and then go to the text tool, and we're going to go ahead and we just need a single line. So let's just type in caps Supernova. So I have a text layer, very straightforward. What's wrong with using this particular font for something like this, like Supernova, a sci-fi movie? What would be the problem with it? Does this type of font would Times be appropriate considering the genre of the movie and the message that we're trying to convey? You know, Times is more of it's a serif font, and it conveys kind of a traditional message, doesn't it? So with something like this, we really want to use kind of a modern type approach, or a modern font. What would you change it to? It could be something pretty straightforward. I would probably change this back to Arial. And so since I've selected it, then I'll go ahead and go back. Excuse me. And I'll change it to Arial. But what I might want to do is, change it to something like Arial and make it bold. So now it really stands out, and it's kind of modern, and it conveys that the whole idea of the genre. And what I want to do is I want to use some effect that will add sort of like a beam of light, or a radial blur, a beam flowing through the text. We're going to use some of the same techniques that you learned in the video to do that. And we're going to keep it simple. And so, we have a reasonable, font right now, and we'll just align it to the composition. And let's go ahead and let's select it again, and we'll change it. Let's just change it to maybe purple or something, and that'll work. And then click OK. All right. And so it's a little bit tiny. Well, it's 96, so we could leave it there. We're going to actually kind of expand it. So let's start at about 72. And so that works. So it's 72 pixels. And again, go ahead and align it and center it to the stage. Okay, now let's scrub to about 2 seconds, and let's go ahead and set our keyframes for the position, and then for the scale, which should be at 100%, and the rotation, which now should be 0. And you should see the keyframe for all three of those properties. And then let's go back and let's scrub back to 0, 0, and let's change the scale way up. Let's crank it up to about 900%. It's going to be huge. We're going to zoom in. Maybe not 900. That's a little too much. How about Let's set it to about 700. Okay, and then we'll set the rotation to -30. I don't want to be +30, I want to be -30. And I could simply type that, right? But there, we're about -30. Okay, so it's kind of where I want it to be right now. And if we scrub, we can see that we get this effect where it just flies in, it rotates, and then pops to the center of the canvas. So this would be a good time for us to save our work, right? So let's just select File and then Save. And you're not going to submit this stuff to the Dropbox. So since you know I like to play around, I'm just going to call this Lesson 3 CP Demo. Okay. And I'm just going to call this Supernova. And then save. And so what I want now is some kind of radial light effect, right, to come through the text. The author tells us that, you know, if we want to apply an effect, we can select animation and browse presets, and that brings up Adobe Bridge. But Bridge is not all that it's made up to be. Especially over the years, it's gotten even more complex. You can use it across multiple Adobe products. It started as a way for you to organize your own compositions and work in Photoshop and Illustrator. You can also browse presets from here. You probably can't see it because it pops out of the confines, but you get a drop-down context menu. And some of the effects are installed, and all you see is a placeholder for the effect, and you can't preview them. And then, even though there are effects that are available to you and installed on your system, you can't always see a preview. You can search all over the web, and there's just not a whole lot of information. One site that I like to use is Motion Island, and it's pretty cool. And there are other sites like this, but what you can do is you go to their site, and you can take a look at some of the presets and everything that are in After Effects and even in Premiere, and just browse through. There are other sites on the web. Adobe doesn't have anything like this. They did a long time ago. I'm just not a big fan of Bridge, quite honestly. And so really, over time, you'll learn what you want to do in terms of your effects and preset. You'll learn what they do and how you want to use them. So let's add a blur effect where we get some movement and like a beam of light, if you will, shining through this text. If you don't currently have it, go ahead and set your current time indicator to 2 seconds. And I should have just not done that. I don't know why it didn't clear out for me. Bring it to 2 seconds. And then what I want you to do is to go to the effect panel and then select blur and sharpen. And under blur and sharpen, select CC radial flash fast blur, and that's already selected, right? So you can either double click and apply it. If I double click it right there, it's not cooperating right now. Let me go back, first select it, and then double click, and it applies it. If I undo, the better way is to grab it and drag it and drop it on the composition and on the stage. I can also drag it and drop it on the timeline, and we can see that we get some initial keyframe set, and we got that blur here, and it's already in effect as we bring our text in and out to 2 minutes. So what I want to do is twirl out the effects control panel, and then so twirl it out so we see radial blur, and then what we want to do is change, make sure again you're at 2 seconds. We want to change the amount or value of this up to 100%. So we're going to take it to 100%, and then we'll go ahead and we'll set a keyframe. Boom. And so we set that keyframe, and then let's move or scrub to 4 seconds. And then at 4 seconds, we're going to set the radial fast blur amount down to 5. And so you can either scrub, or you can just type 5. And now we can see that brings it down pretty much to where we want it to be. And so if we scrub, we can see that effect and what's going on, right? It enters, we got kind of that flare, and then it goes down. Pretty cool, pretty cool. So we got a lot of keyframes here. We want to do some easing and everything. So what we should do is use we were introduced to it this week, the infamous Uber key, the Uber. You select the layer and then press U on your keyboard, and then that will show us all the layers where we have our keyframes here. And if you click and drag, we can select all of these guys, and let me try it again, make sure I have everybody selected. Click and drag. Good. And then go to animation, and you saw this in the demonstration, and select keyframe assistant. And what we're going to do is we're going to use easy ease, and this ease these effects in, and it probably won't be noticeable. If we go ahead and we select and we go back to home and we play it, then we see everything easing in. We get a little bit of choppiness because I'm on my PC, right? We can stop and go back to home. Okay, we're almost done with this thing, and what we're going to do next is we're going to use a solid. Now, you haven't been introduced to solids, so what exactly are solids? Well, solids are essentially layers, and they're solid color layers, and they're used for a variety of reasons. A common application might be that you add a solid color above a layer, and then you want to use it as something like an interference pattern, and you apply effects such that you get some kind of interference in that. Like, we'll take a look next week at how to use a solid and an interference pattern so we can create the effect of water moving. And you can use them for things like masking, and you can even use them as footage, as we'll see here in a second. We're going to create a solid layer behind and use it as a background layer, and then create our star field pattern. So to add the solid, we're going to go to layer and select new layer and select solid. And let's call this one star background. And it's going to, by default, it's going to be basically the size of our canvas. But it's safe to say let's make it the comp size, which is the same, because you might have nested one comp within another, and you want this solid to be the size of the comp, not the size of the main composition, right? And then let's change the color to white, because there's a reason we're going to do that. And we'll go ahead and click OK, and then click OK. Now that solid is above the supernova text, right, which we don't want. So what I suggest, of course, lock supernova for now, and what we want to do is we want to move it below, right? And so now we see that we don't have that beautiful black background that we wanted, right, when we get this effect. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add an effect to the solid, in this case, to create the starburst effect, which will make it look like they're tiny little stars, and that the text is moving through space. So this time, make sure that you have the star background layer selected. We're going to go to Effect on the toolbar. You could also go to Effects and Presets, right? We'll select Effect, and then go to Simulation, and then pull down and select CC Starburst. And now you can see that pattern, right? Doesn't that sort of look like Star Trek, right? But those are some pretty big stars, and we're probably like at the center of the galaxy, right? So what we want to do is twirl down and go to the Effects Control panel, and then under CC Starburst, what we should do is let's take the speed and let's bring it down from 1 to 0.2, and let's set the size of the particles down to 0.2. And now we get a smaller effect. And what that will do is generate the star field for us. And that's all done for us kind of automatically. So let's save our work. Select File, and then Save, and then go back to Home, and then Preview, and then we get this little star field effect, and the text comes in. And so that was a little bit longer than I wanted, but you get the idea. What I want to invite you to do is to play around with some other effects that you might add to this. This reminds me of when I was a young kid, I watched Battlestar Galactica, and it's kind of the introduction. And so this is the first of 2 or 3. I'll try to keep it simple and shorter. And I'm making some changes from the last semester I taught the class, and so instead of kind of regurgitating what you're doing in the reading, I'd like to kind of bounce around and give you some tips.